Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with all of you and coordinate this panel with these great professionals who will be talking about the opportunities we find in Argentina agriculture to face the new global challenges. And we'll mostly focus on oilseeds and vegetable oils. First, Andrés will talk about the international context, regulatory aspects, promoting demand for oil, replacing fossil fuels with biofuels. Then Jorge will talk specifically about sunflower oil, international demand, and the possibilities we have in Argentina to supply this demand. And finally, Ruben will talk about the experience new farm has in adjusting to these changes and facing these new global challenges. We will now give the floor to the experts. Andrés, the floor is yours. Good morning. I'm very happy to be back at an Aapresid Congress and see so many faces that I may see only once a year. I'm going to talk about the demand for oil. What is the current situation like? Today, approximately 60 million of vegetable oil and fat are used all over the world to produce biofuel. In the next few years, we will see a growing demand. Some months ago in the U.S., there was a draft bill aiming at increasing the mix, and this would account for an additional 5 million tons demand. This is interesting because it's 67% increase, but imported raw material will not be able to compete. There will not be any subsidies for production. So it will be interesting to see how they work this issue out. Then we have Brazil that will go from B14 to B15. Every point is almost additional 450,000 tons of oil, and they are already talking about going on with that 1% increase a year until they reach B20. So there will be a significant increase over the next 5 years. And Indonesia is transitioning from B35. The number is a percentage of biofuel in the fuel used for cars. So they would go from 35 to 40%. This is already happening. And they're speaking of aiming at 45 by 2028 again, an additional 2 million tons. On the other hand, the European Union, this is all for ground transportation, is also forecasting a great demand. They're transitioning to electric vehicles and second-generation biofuels, which are the ones that theoretically have lower greenhouse gas emissions. This is without considering the aviation fuel. And this is where the big disruptive change comes. This will become mandatory in some countries. IATA is projecting to become carbon neutral by 2050. This graph shows their estimations how fossil fuel will be replaced. Pale blue is fossil fuel, darker and dark blue. Dark blue is SAF based on oils with the HEFA method. The gray area I don't think this will be reached. It's PTL, which is converting energy to liquid biofuel, capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But as we will see in a short while, this is very expensive. So I think that the easiest and less expensive way to reach this will be production based on oil, the HIFA method, hydroprocessed esters and fatty acids. This leads to the following estimated demand for fuel. The previous graph was terabytes of energy. This is million tons. According to estimations, which are not all the same, on this graph we see the different regions. The green part is Europe. The orange part, sorry, is Europe. Europe has different requirements in terms of sustainability as compared to the other regions. But we are seeing that in 5 years' time, that additional demand for SAF will range from 13, 14 to 18 million tons. And then it will keep growing. If we go to the time when IATA said that they will become carbon neutral, then that will be 200 tons of SAF. When it started, it's like 60 million of oils and fats are used today to produce fuel. This would be a five-fold increase in 25 years' time. There are different ways of producing SAF. HIFA is the one that's based on oil. It's the cheapest one today. Well, the only one that has where there are already plants producing it. Then this ATJ, alcohol to jet, based on the fermentation of different organic matters, maybe corn, any product producing ethanol that is eventually processed to produce that SPK. And PTL is the one I've already mentioned. You have to hugely increase electric energy production from any source to convert that energy into a liquid fuel using any source of carbon dioxide, maybe residues, but also capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It's great because it helps a lot to reduce emissions. It would be negative emissions, obviously, but it's extremely expensive. And we will see some estimations. This is Europe. In the United States, you can use soybean or canola oil to produce SAF if you meet certain requirements, such as having non-harvestable cover crops, doing no-till, etc. But they're more flexible. They do not consider the impact on soil use. Almost any raw material may be used. In the case of Europe, only residues, waste, or special crops can be used if they do not replace food stock or feed stock, and provided the impact on emissions is almost non-existent. And here we can see an estimation made by Bain. On the left, you can see cooking oil, which I think will account for the largest volume. On the horizontal axis, we're seeing the volume, estimated volume, and the vertical axis, the cost of the different alternatives. The cheapest would be used cooking oil, animal fat. Then circled, we can see the oil seeds that theoretically could not be the ones used for food stuff. And here there is a huge opportunity for cover crops such as carinata, and we have the alcohol to jet, which is more expensive, let alone PTL. You can see the price ratio. would make it almost impossibly expensive. It should be subsidized by governments, or airfare would cost 3 times as much. What impact is this having on the market? This is about 16 months. The Chicago oil at the top and protein meals at the bottom. We're seeing this strong oil demand, but on the other hand, the big growth in the demand for meals that we've seen over the last 20 years is not keeping the same pace. We're seeing a plateau. This may change, but if we see how much beef is consumed in Southeast Asia was consumed in Southeast Asia or in China 20 years ago, we see that it's changed dramatically, and they've already reached first world countries. So this trend is not likely to continue, but the contribution of oil to the margin of oilseed companies will become lower, and there will not be so much meal demand. What are the opportunities for Argentinian farmers? Well, oilseeds with a high oil content should improve their price in comparison with sunflower, scalinata, and rape or canola. Estimations for next year go beyond 5 million tons, 2.5 million hectares, and the trend should continue. The rape area is small for now, from 35 to 50,000 hectares, but we believe this will grow strongly. Carinata, last year we had 20,000, and this year there are 60,000 hectares that are planted. As I showed you in the graph 4 or 5 slides ago, the main consumer of SAF or SAF is going to be Europe, and Europe has different requirements. Here we see Corsia. Corsia is a carbon offsetting and reduction scheme. It's a project to reduce carbon emission in civil aviation. There is also the International Civil Aviation Organization that's part of the United Nations, and they have estimations for emissions and for the different raw materials. In red, you can see the fossil jet fuel. On the left, we see palm oil, which is to be blamed for changes in land use. And then there's rapeseed, soybean, and carinata, brassica carinata on the right, with improved savings. And the note here is that ESCA is not included, which is carbon accumulation in the soil. Because of the large organic matter volume that is produced, there are lots of residues left in the soil, and it's been verified that carbon from the atmosphere is captured and it's integrated into the soil, which provides for additional benefits. So we're very interested in carinata and its future. Well, this is it. And I will now give the floor to Jorge. Thank you, Andrés.
Muchas gracias, Andrés. ¿Está prendido?
Thanks, Andrés. Is the mic on? Thanks very much. Now we will give the floor to Jorge. Good morning. Thanks to you all. Thanks for trusting me. Thanks, Aapresid, for the organization. And thanks, Asahir, for putting up with me for 24 years, which is a long time. First, I want to wish a happy day to veterinarians and agricultural engineers. They do a great job, not like me, who work with the computer and sometimes in bed. My role is to speak of sunflower. Sunflower is grown for oil production. 80% of sunflower price is dependent upon oil price, and the rest is the meal. Yields are well above 50%. That's the national average fat per ton of oil, and sunflower oil is not used for biofuel purposes. You must have that clear. We sees the demand for oils for other purposes, such as biofuels. Sunflower oil is used basically for cooking, fried eggs, for example. It's edible oil. Industrial consumption of vegetable oils has grown at around 4% per year on a cumulative basis, and global sunflower oil exports have grown until to 15%. And before the Russia-Ukraine war, the growth was 9% on a cumulative basis, because Asians, as income levels increased, they would buy better quality oil, and there's nothing like a fried egg fried in good sunflower oil. Demand from China became stagnant since 2021. China is no longer the driver, growing at 21%. This year, its growth rate will be 4.6%, but there is the Ukraine-Russia conflict that has been in place for 41 months now. Russia and Ukraine accounted for 55% of global sunflower oil production and 80% of exports. Russia invaded Ukraine, and now, a year later, there came a scarcity situation. This year ending in the Northern Hemisphere, which ended on the 1st of May, was a scarcity year. There was a lack of 5 million tons of sunflower in the world, and we seized the opportunity because we are a big exporter that enters the market counter-seasonally with 8% of the global market. When others are completing sales, we step in with our modest sunflower oil, which was so much attacked by the former government. About the history of sunflower, we all remember that back in the 90s, there were lots of industrial plants being set up. There was a huge growth in production. We are not scared by the 2.6 million hectares because we have planted 4 million hectares in 1998. We are not scared by 5 million hectares because we reached 7 million in 1999. So Argentina is indeed prepared, but there was, for you to have an idea and not to take too long, over the last year with Cristina Kirchner in the government, we sold 350,000 tons. This year we're going to sell 1.3 million. And as Andrés said, there is a wonderful sowing expectation, moisture in moist soils, especially in the north of Argentina. The north can produce 500,000 hectares. Last year they were 260,000. When rainfall is scarce, farmers go for another crop. And why do they go for sunflower? Well, because they receive the money by December and they can go on holiday. It is a very useful crop. It's being sown successfully. Seed companies have sold sunflower seeds very well, so it's doing great. How is the sunflower market made up globally? Sunflower is used for consumption. It is a contract market. The price is based on CIF Rotterdam. there's no Chicago market for sunflower because Americans produce or grow sunflower by contract. So price is determined using CIF Rotterdam, fed by Ukraine, and then through the Black Sea, and then Russia, which is a large producer, the main producer. I don't know if all sunflower is grown actually in Russia or partly in Ukraine, but in a nutshell, 56 million tons are produced, 22 million tons of oils are extracted, and 13 million tons are exported. That's the most open vegetable oil economy in the world if you take the percentage of exports over the total. Why the most open? Because there are few farmers and growers. There's us, some neighboring countries, South Africa to some extent, then comes the European Union, Russia and Ukraine, as I said. Thank God, demand is far more diversified, 26% India, 25% Middle East, 15–16% China in its best years, and then comes Turkey, which buys and sells, just like the European Union, and then us, and I forgot Latin America. Latin America is also a huge market for us. So that's how it is made up. Demand is diversified in terms of the number of countries, and supply is far more concentrated. Of course, the story I'm telling you about, and that we produce 7 million tons, back then Ukraine was not a large sunflower oil supplier. Ukraine produces for export purposes. There are domestic tax reimbursements and exemptions, which we do not enjoy, especially in the case of raw oil. So it is very important to understand the scenario to realize the potential we may tap in Argentina. What about the situation in Europe today and in producing countries? Well, you have seen it on TV, huge heat waves, lots of problems, droughts in the case of Ukraine, especially in the core area. But nonetheless, prices have been maintained. The price published by the stock, by the market, has grown by 2.7%. The FOB price is above 35% higher than the average price before the war. We will have 1,600 billion worth of exports. We are the 9th export complex in Argentina, so watch out. We are not the macho men, but for a crop that had 80% withholdings applied for so many years, we did quite well. Don't let me tell you what happened at Asahir when we reached 1.6 million hectares. Everyone said, well, what are we doing here? Even the papers would say it was a botanical rarity. Today, everyone speaks of sunflower as a star crop. We are not in the core area. Sunflower has been grown in the worst plots. That's the sad story behind that. To me, the most encouraging news looking forward, in addition to what Iolster has said, which I share, of course, if it is used for vegetable oil alone, then, well, all the food is left for sunflower oil. When you look at growth rates, clearly industrial consumption was the reason for the big deployment of soybean and palm oil. And for 7 years, canola in Europe and the European Union. Then they stopped because it was expensive. It was cheaper to bring fuel or use it from other sources. So the good price will move on. Say, to give an idea, the shift from the current position in October, when the Northern Hemisphere harvest starts, it's $30. It's just nothing. Over $1,250, that's the price of oil in Rotterdam. It is not speculative price, but firm contract price. It's a price that needs to be followed up on the market. Of course, we do not receive the Rotterdam price, but my ideal, my aspiration, and what I'm witnessing on a personal note is that all the people, the young farmers who who joined Argentina's agricultural practices during the bad period of sunflower knew little about it, so they have to incorporate it, make it part of rotation. I come from Cordoba, in the north of Cordoba. Farmers grow wheat, corn, sunflower, soybean, and sorghum if they have cattle for dairy production, but not sunflower. In the north of Cordoba, they would say, don't insist because it ends up being eaten by doves. So I absolutely believe, I firmly believe, that we need to pay attention to this crop. Young farmers have to seriously approach it, include it in rotation, allocate good plots to it. Not perhaps the best, but better plots. The problem with Ukraine and Russia will continue. It won't be solved in the short term, so the market will be in a difficult position for many years. And let me finish by saying that most probably in April next year, and if I have convinced you with my speech, remember that we will have the Sunflower Congress. The last one was in the year 2019. I hope you have become interested by my talk, and I will give the floor to the next speaker. Thanks, Jorge. Very interesting. Ruben. Well, pleasure to be here with you today and share a practical case of a global company based in Argentina to see how we adapt to the market. Strategically, Nufarma has decided to become an innovation company rather than a seed company alone. This is not an easy task, but it is not impossible either, especially considering our market and the ups and downs all of us Argentinians face. We've been on the market for 15 years now. We perhaps know us as New Seed, the predecessor. We have decided to change the corporate name. That's why the company is called Nufarm. Now we have crop protection and seeds. I'm going to speak mostly about seeds. You know that there is a difference between changing and transforming. When you change, you may go back to the previous stage, whereas when you transform, that's a radical development that takes place. That change is what we are trying to manage at an organizational level within Nufarm. We have heard what was being said about adapting to the market. But the world needs more food. Fiber, biofuels, the changes in global demand have been very well explained by Andrés and Jorge. But there is a growing population that demands for more food, and that's what we are here for. Larger demand will be met by larger yields and a reduction in wastes. The way we produce foodstuffs will be more looked into. That's why we're speaking of traceability. We have a unique opportunity at hand because of the boom of sustainable crops. Crops may generate new markets that were unthinkable in the past. And that's what we do at Nufarm. Look at this. Agriculture has been developed over a mentality that is focused on grains and yields. I have been working in the seed industry for 30 years, and what we always did was to offer a tested quality product, meeting all the required features. And now they have changed the script. Now we have to speak about grains and consumers. That's the evolution that we have to accompany on a constant basis at a global level. Nufarm has 3,000 employees in 50 countries, and it strategically studies how to accompany this development in demand in order to deliver specific products. That is why I always like working on input traits and output traits. Input traits have to do with the farmer, with what the farmer receives for growing. The output traits are the transformation that no farm is engaging in order to offer something that is adapted to the end consumer. That is why 6 years ago we presented Carinata crops. Jorge was saying that young people are not familiar with all the features required for sunflower growing. Imagine when we introduced Carinata to the market. Cari what? They would say. So there is the need to accompany that transformation. Carinata is an oil seed that was introduced into the market for the production of aviation biofuels. And it was a very successful story at the regional level. We are exceeding 150,000 hectares already. And this is not by chance. It is a decision, a strategic decision made by the company to step forward in innovation, but also including farmers as part of this process, in addition to strategic partners who are working with us. No farm has 5 crops globally, which have been strategically chosen to change and accompany the new demand throughout the world. Canola, rapeseed. We have an innovation center in Horsham, Australia, that is exclusively devoted to this crop. That is why we have access to the best genetics. We are the #1 company in Australia in terms of canola oil and number 5 in the world. Carinata is the only company that has conducted research, and research is done in Argentina, not just globally. The innovation center we have in Venado Tuerto allowed us to bring the first 2 hybrids in the world into the market, Nujet 400 and Nujet 350. These products have not only been researched into, launched into the market, but they are already exported to many locations. All of Carinata's developments at a global level involve products that are shipped from Argentina. Every issue we face in the country, well, it's not what we have in hand, but what we do with it and how we can move further. No farm has made a clear decision in that regard. Also, we are one of the #1 companies in sorghum. In Venado Tuerto, we have the research center, but we are also working together with Brazil and Vega, Texas. And as for sunflower, we have this advanced crop. We talked a lot about sunflower today, especially the progress made by Nufarm in this regard has consisted in acquiring new technology by acquiring the Paraíso brand, our genetics. This was revolutionary for all of us, also accompanying the need to develop the crop. Notice this addition by farm with value in addition to yields. What do we mean? We have developed plant-based solutions. The crop that we bring to the farmer is not the end product. It's the means we use to reach out to consumers, and this is essential. We are a research company. I have not mentioned the other innovation center we have in West Sacramento, California, which is available for all crops. But everything, all in that research is dedicated to serving farmers, and that's the input train. We have agronomical benefits for farmers. We move forward without neglecting genetics or quality or the top generation products that we bring into the market adapted to the various regions. But that's not the end. That's why we have shifted to output trade, the last column. That's where we provide for the plant-related benefits for end consumers. I have no time, unfortunately. I would like to continue talking about Carinata and the different developments led by engineer Sebastián Bravo, who together with me presented this crop into the market. But I cannot but mention this innovation. We are the first company to offer an omega-3 solution to the market. This is part of the strategic development in Argentina to see whether we can bring it here. It's canola omega-3 is a transgene product. Canola here is not transgenic, so we have to ask for certain permits, and we are working on that. But this is a way in which we can prove how we, as a company that was exclusively a seed company, become transformed to meet demand. And that's why, led by canola omega-3, we have two brands, Aquaterra and Nutriterra. Aquaterra intended to provide omega-3 for fish, and Nutriterra for human consumption. So within the company today, we have biologists and pharmacists, which was unthinkable in the past. I mean, a seed company like New Seed. That is why we changed the corporate name from New Seed to New Farm. All this is not a coincidence. It is part of a strategic corporate progress we are trying to make to accompany our people and deliver the best. That's why this is a cultural shift. And I always like to mention that we have a new farm value chain, which is very important, that starts with innovation, does not end in farmers, but goes on and continues to the end consumer. For that, we have an organizational culture in place that is based on our values, that is responsibility, promptness, respect, and empowerment, all of which ensures that all of the employees may do their best and deliver their best, because whenever you work in a hostile environment, they sort of step back and stay within their comfort zone, whereas we allow for growth in an organizational culture, we can do our best. And that's where these innovations take place. It's not just a matter of launching the idea, but also it consists in engaging in a strategic development. That is, how to move forward through the various stages in order to be successful. Say, for example, what is being done in Carinata with over 100,000 hectares in the country. Thanks for allowing me to share my views. Pleasure to be with this panel. And I thought, as a company, we thought as a company, it was worth sharing at least a brief introduction of what this meant to us, that is, responding to market needs with products we had already, but which needed to be subject to transformation at the corporate level. Thanks very much, Ruben.
Thank you, Ruben. And before concluding, I have a question for each of you to discuss some of the aspects you mentioned in your presentation. My first question is for Andrés. What is the potential of Carinata in the region in terms of surface area and maybe production? And how big do you think the demand might be in 5 years' time? In terms of demand, I mentioned this partly in my presentation. The main market, we believe, will be Europe, but we still need the bill. So Appendix 9 of the network is what defines what will come into Europe as raw material to produce fuels, and specifically SAF. It mentions cover crop, but it also says that that cover crop cannot replace food crops. How can this be checked? This is yet to be defined. In Argentina, and this answers the other part of your question, we have 28 million hectares of summer crop and only 8 million winter crop, mostly wheat and barley. And there is a huge opportunity there, not only for carinata, but also for rapeseed in those 20 million hectares. And those 20 million hectares are mostly fallows, and the idea is to replace part of that. So 20 million we can replace. Can we replace 5% of that with carinata? That's 1 million hectares. So the potential is there. And globally, some estimations show that since in Argentina there are 20 million potential hectares, globally there are 170 million hectares. So 1, 2, or 3% of that would be a lot. Thank you, Andrés. Jorge. What are the prospects for the high oleic sunflower oil? Well, we may say that this is a totally different market. It's a market with a special use. This oil is used for cooking at high temperature for a long time. And it's also in the labels of the main brands, especially in Europe, where food composition requirements are met. The demand is there because McDonald's has to keep frying food. The supply depends on climate in France, in other European countries. We always tell Argentinian growers that this year we'll reach 10% of the total, but we always tell farmers, because in Argentina, harvesting has two stages. Planting has two stages. One is sunflower, July, August, and then October, November, there is planting in the south. When you plant high oleic oil in the south, the situation in the northern hemisphere is quite clear. What we know is that in the flowering stage, damage due to heat and drought has been great, but we shouldn't be so excited and produce too much high oleic oil. Where we say that we should not mix oils, we always recommend farmers two things. Number one, not mixing both oils, because that product does not exist in the world. It's either one thing or the other. And the mix is not accepted elsewhere. It's rejected. And secondly, we always tell farmers that they should plant with contracts, with a prime, which is usually around $20, $30, $40. That depends on the market. But sometimes we get too enthusiastic. We see France is not doing well, the prime goes very high, and when we get there, the expectation in the northern hemisphere has improved, and we lose. So we end up mixing, and that is not a good thing. I think we will have an excellent year for sunflower, the regular oil and high oleic oil, and there are very good prospects, because in Europe there are commercial wars, real wars, but India, which is a country that's growing the largest, is growing at 5 or 6% rate, and 4% China. So what's coming makes us think that obviously middle classes, hotels, fast food companies, they all like fried food. So high oleic oil has a promising future that may be even more promising than the regular oil. Thank you, Jorge. When I joined Ciara, there were negotiations to modify the Argentinian food code, and they were discussing the percentage of high oleic oil in the traditional oil. So that is real. The mix of high oleic and traditional oil may generate issues at the international trade level. Well, Ruben, you discussed the institutional and organizational impact that affected your company. Could you expand on the organizational changes that New Farm had to make in order to face this innovation stage? In terms of carinata specifically, carinata is a crop that is certified with traceability, so we started to treat it as an additional crop, and in time we realized that carinata has become a program, so it is much more complex, it has a different development, where we have to support farmers at the different stages. So first we had to add certification that we did not have. So we added a department with new topics that we were not familiar with. Carinata has RCV, so we had to adjust the organization based on that. We also had to support farmers at the different stages, not only during planting, but also during harvesting. So we needed to provide agricultural support throughout the process, and carinata is a closed production system with a closed contract, unlike other crops. So we had to support crop development. I'm saying this now after 7 years of work. If you had asked me the same question and the second year, my answer would have been different. The good thing I think is considering what happens with the market in terms of crop development and then flexibly supporting with an interdisciplinary team what the market needs so that you can be successful. Sometimes we believe that success is accidental. Things just happen. But that's not true. Things are created, and this is what we have tried to do. Thank you very much, Ruben. And in order to conclude, I'd like to thank everyone for having been here with us. I'd like to thank New Farm for discussing this topic. I think we have contributed to the Congress's motto, which is opening up our code, sharing our code, and mentioning all these topics that you have just mentioned that will help us enrich our knowledge and that are related to challenges faced by Argentinian agriculture.